We had a huge semifinal weekend, and I'm going to wrap it all up for you, hopefully sort of quickly. So let's get straight into it. We're gonna start with Syndicate Crown. That happened in Knoxville, Tennessee. Athletes competing there were only athletes who had not qualified for the CrossFit Games yet. So if you had a ticket, you could not be there, you could not compete. These were all athletes still trying to get their tickets. It was streamed by the Sevon podcast, who I think did a pretty good job taking on an event like this for the first time, an event that's this big. I know they did the Crash Crucible, but that is in a smaller location at a gym versus at an arena. There were definitely some hiccups, but they seemed to have recovered well. They got some feedback even from Scott Panchek, who gave them some advice on maybe cleaning up the live stream a little bit because new people are watching and you just want to make sure you're attracting the most people as possible. You attract more bees with honey than vinegar, and I think that's an important thing to remember. And they took that feedback and worked with it. They had like little mishaps where the mics weren't on at one point and some dissolves instead of cutting from cameras that probably didn't need to happen. But in general, I think they did really well and learned a lot, and I'm excited to see what they do at NorCal. I do want to add that the broadcast definitely missed some things. There were moments that the announcers were talking about people, that the cameras were not on. The people operating the cameras clearly didn't have earpieces in, which they should. I mean, you just need headphones. You can literally put a phone call and have a director on the phone in a headset and have those two people operating the cameras on a merged phone call and listening in to what the director is saying so they know which camera is hot and which camera has to be on who. But these are all things that they have to learn. They admitted that they don't have a lot of broadcast experience, and I feel like it's become a little bit popular to talk about lack of experience and doing things for cheap. And I do think the results look a little bit cheaper. I think as the Sevon podcast does more of these things and gets more experience and can't say, hey, we have a bunch of people who have never done this before, and instead can say, hey, we have a bunch of experienced people, it will look better. The angles will be better. I think we need to have people who know how to do the jobs doing the jobs. And I appreciate Sevon and his team taking this on. And I hope that as they get better, they will own that they are better and more experienced, and that is what is needed to put on a good broadcast. I also know a lot of people complain about the ISO angles, like the isolated shots and not getting to see the whole floor. I think if you just had wide shots of the whole floor, I don't think it'll look as good as what people anticipate it looking like. I think it's hard to see people. I think everyone's going to look like a little ant out there, and you won't know who you're looking at. So I do think that critique can be fair in the sense that they could probably use some more wide shots, but also is a little bit of overkill. Let's talk about the leaderboard. So let's start with the men's side, and this was all very close. And this weekend, some of my picks weren't great, but on the men's side here, they were pretty good. Not exact, but good. So, in first place, you had Ty Jenkins. He is just coming out of the teen division, made that jump from teen to elite, I think quicker than most men we've seen in the past. Very impressive to actually win the competition. Not that he did it in dominant fashion. He had 5:31 and the second place person had 5:28. That's 3 points. That's one spot in one event. That's it. So it was a close leaderboard, but it kept things exciting all weekend. So Ty Jenkins, who I had in second, ended up finishing in first. In second was Jack Rosema, who I had in first, and he finished second. So the two people I chose to qualify from the men's field at Syndicate did qualify just in the opposite order of what I said. And Second and third, even closer than first and second. That would be Jack Rosenbaum in second, and in third, Luke Parker. Both had 528 points. It came down to a tiebreaker. I did not expect Luke Parker to do quite this well. I just haven't been super impressed by him this season, so I sort of thought he would be, maybe top 5, which obviously he is, but not tied for points for a games position. So impressed by Luke Parker. He is retiring. He said this is his last season. He's having his second child later this year. So I think his focus is elsewhere. And maybe he'll do the last chance qualifier. Maybe he'll qualify. Maybe he'll go to NorCal. I mean, who knows? That field isn't exactly locked just yet. So a lot of questions there, but really good race on the men's side. And I think that says something for how well this competition was programmed. It was programmed by J.R. Howell of CrossFit Crash, and it was great races all weekend, and it led to a tight leaderboard. And I think that always makes things so much more interesting and so exciting. And it was fairly tight on both the women's and men's side, although the women was a little bit more set at the end than the men, but well, not really set. At least one person was set. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's continue talking about the men. In fourth, Spencer Panchak, who did a little bit better than I expected him to do in this field. And I think it really came down to those last 2 events for Spencer, where he did really well, taking a first in event 5 and a first in event 6. So Spencer really made his way up the leaderboard in this final day of competition. And you can't really say quite put himself in the mix. He had a couple workouts that kept him far out, like getting a 32nd on the second workout of a day 1. But then actually, let me correct myself. He had 3 wins. He won the final event of day 2, medal march, and then both events on day 3. Really, that one 24th place finish just knocked him out of contention, and he was 62 points out, which is, that's fairly significant, but clearly had really one major hole. He finished 12th on Heavy Isabel. In 5th, George Sterner, who also looked good most of the weekend. I was very impressed by him. And, there was a second where it was like, can Sterner qualify? He did not do well in that final workout, which was back 9. It was a heavy sandbag, and his sandbag looked heavier than everyone else's. But George Sterner hasn't been taking training as the biggest priority from what he said earlier this season. Maybe with the success that he's had this season, maybe he sees that there's a possibility for him to be competitive here, and maybe he'll put a little bit more of a priority on it, because we have people like Luke Parker ahead of him who's retiring. So there's going to be spots. There's going to be openings. 6th was Connor Voltez. 7th, Seth Stovall, who a lot of people had, or some people had, to win this. I didn't see that. I didn't have him winning it. And this makes sense, a top 10 finish for sure. But 7th for Seth Stovall. Did not see him beating Jack and Ty, which is why I didn't put him there. Anyway, 8th, Tanner Balaz, who I think is somebody who is getting better, and we can hear his name more going on. Ben Smith, who is an athlete that went to the games more times than I even know or remember. He won the CrossFit Games in 2015, and he's still competing at this level. I believe he's 35 now, so really impressed by Ben in this field, still being a top 10 athlete and showing that you can maintain this fitness for years and years to come.
When you're out here, do you have any sense of how probably most of the competitors maybe even started CrossFit because of guys like you, and maybe even you specifically? That's cool.
He's the kind of person I think we should all sort of aspire to in some ways, like not winning the games, but someone that shows us that you can continue to do this as you age. Somebody that was doing this literally as a teenager, like been doing it for 2 decades basically, is still doing it today and able to compete with the big dogs. Really impressive by Ben Smith. He has a lot less, training now. He's not training beating himself down. He moves every day, but he's not like training like a games athlete, but he's competing with athletes who are trying to train like games athletes. Ben Smith, has my respect. And then rounding out the 10th place position was Henry Matthews. Let's head over to the women's side of the field. And I got one of the two right here. And the person who finished second, I really debated putting in a qualifying position. And it turns out I should have. So in first place, we have Brooke Wells. I actually had her in second, but I said, like, I think that she just has the capacity to do well here. That she's just a little bit better than a lot of these athletes. Because again, like I said earlier, this was only athletes who had not qualified for the games yet. So it left her in a field of athletes that I just think she's better than. This is her 10th games, not consecutive. She didn't qualify the one year. Actually, her sister did qualify in 2023, but she did not qualify that year. She, I believe, had an injury at semifinals and didn't make it. And in this field where most people hadn't qualified, she arguably, not that she should have qualified out of the in-affiliate semifinals, she didn't do the movements correct. She didn't face the camera correctly. She was penalized for things that she should be penalized for. But I think she had the ability, if she was held to the right standards, if someone reminded her of the standards, yes, she should know that. But if she had a judge there like she had judges here, I think she could have qualified. And I know she had a judge, but obviously those judges were not as good and not holding up the standards like these judges were. So I think she could have qualified out of that with a better judge and then was able to qualify here with a healthy margin. She was 54 points ahead of second. She was first in day one, first in day two, first in day three. She sat in that first place position literally the entire weekend except for the fact that she finished second in the first event. But after the second event, she was in first place. So Brooke, just better than the rest of this field, and she showed it. She looked really good. Back to the games, 10th qualification. In second, we had a race. So Lexi Neely finished second, going back to the CrossFit Games for her second year. She was 21 points going into the final event, 21 points out. She needed to make up 21 points on Reese Littlewood. And she did what she needed to do by winning the event.
The place is on its feet.
She got it. She got it.
Comes in. 547.
And then Reese gave her some assistance by finishing 12th, which is not horrible for someone like Reese Littlewood, who is still a teenager, and that heavy sandbag, 150 pounds, made a huge difference. And we actually saw all of the teen girls, women, who were doing really well all weekends sort of falter on that sandbag. It was a lot for them to handle. They don't have that brute strength just yet. Me, I never have it. But they I think will get it. They just don't have it yet. And Reese just lost it there. She needed to be within about, I think it was 8 positions, and she would have had the tiebreaker. She finished 8th. She finished 12th. So Lexi did everything she needed to do. She took it into her own hands and control, and she got the win. And Reese just fell a little bit short. But I think we saw Reese win 2 events. I think we're going to see a lot more of Reese Littlewood in the future and her get older and mature. But she came off pretty mature, actually, as she is. And she's just going to continue to grow and become better in the sport, become stronger, become more experienced. I think we're going to see more from Reese Littlewood. This was a really impressive showing. In 4th, Lydia Fish, who had a 29th place finish, first event on that heavy Isabel, and then just really solid finishes after that. She had a 5th, a 2nd, a 4th, and then she struggled a little bit with that heavy sandbag, but she got that 8th place finish. So pretty impressed by Lydia Fish. If heavy Isabel wasn't in this, she might be going to the games, but there's always going to be something heavy. So she does have to fill that gap, but I think she's doing a good job of getting there. In 5th, we have Caroline Stanley. I actually expected a little bit more from her, maybe like a 3rd place, being right in that mix for a games position. She honestly wasn't most of the weekend. We weren't talking about her to get a games position at any point while watching the competition. Maybe before the competition, but once it was going on, she was just, a top 10, but not in that mix for top 3. And she ended up finishing 5th, and I think that's probably close to the best she was most of the weekend. In 6th, Sydney Wells, who really made up a lot of ground on that final day with a 2nd place finish in the bag 9. She struggles with ring muscle-ups, but she could dominate on that sandbag, and that made the big difference, and that's how she ended up getting herself in a solid 6th place position, a little bit better than I thought she would do, although I did think top 10 was very much possible. Kira Milligan was looking like she was fighting for that top 2 position as well. And then she got no-wrapped on a handstand walk in athletes only event 5. And it just took her out. It took her out of contention. I think it messed with her head a little bit. She did finish 3rd in the bag 9, but that event really crushed her. And then she also finished 20th on the yoke repeater, the running workout, but she hasn't been great at running at any point. Seems like 20th isn't awful for her in that event, but it was really that handstand walk where she just burned out. She redlined. She pushed a little bit too hard and cost her quite a bit. Miley Wade, another teenage athlete. We're talking about the teenagers with Reese Littlewood. Miley Wade looked really great. She got herself a very good finish on that yoke repeater, a 4th place finish. She had 5ths. She had a very solid weekend. I think she should be proud of this, someone to look to for the future. But I believe she's still 17 and is going to the games as a teen athlete this year. So she's still getting to compete. Her season's not over. This was like a training competition, and I have to imagine that she'll be happy with this finish as somebody who's 17 and going to the teen games, top 10 at a semifinal with the elite women. 9th, Nina Vrakovic. She's a Mayhem athlete, has been doing pretty well in some of these elite competitions, not quite to the point where we're talking about her to make the games, but very respectable finishes from Nina. And 10th, Erica Folo, who looked great at the end of day 1 with a dominating performance in Regionals Revenge, but fell off near the back end of the weekend with a 28th in the medal march, the final workout on Saturday, and then on Sunday taking a 24th and I think falling on one of her handstand walks on the athletes only event, but then a 5th to wind things out with bag 9. So an up and down weekend for Erica. I think she got a new coach this year. We still have a lot more to see from her going forward. I think she will continue to compete, and she's still very young. But I think she needs a year or so with her new coach, building up that confidence and that trust in that relationship, which I think takes a little bit of time. Let's go over to the other really big event of the weekend, and that was Torian Pro. We will start on the men's side, and the top 2 ended up being the same top 2 I thought they were going to be, but it doesn't really matter because they both have their tickets. It was Ricky Garrard in first, and Ricky looked great. He looked better this weekend than he's looked in a while. He had 594 out of 600 points, so that is 2 second place finishes, and the rest were 1st place finishes. So very impressive weekend by Ricky. I think he's someone we really have to look at to podium at the CrossFit Games this year. Again, he has in the past. I think that he's putting things together right now. He's had some off performances, some illnesses, some little injuries, but I think if he could stay healthy, he's putting it together. Jay Crouch came in 2nd, and he was at 552 points, so not very far ahead of our 3rd place finishing athlete, and that was Guy Malheiros. Okay. I said in my last video, I'm not really sure what to do with Guy. He kind of comes out and acts like he's retiring and like he's not super into being competitive in this anymore. He says he's not going to do this season, that like it's a lot to travel to Copa Sur, which is in Brazil and on the same side of the world as he lives in Tennessee. This is the other side of the world. Bigger time change, Australia, and he finishes 3rd, which if he had done well enough in the Open would have qualified him for the CrossFit Games, but not going. So Guy finished 3rd on the podium. He seemed like he was having a lot of fun. That's cool. All right, so let's go to our actual qualifiers. One of them is an athlete that I had picked to qualify. Actually, in 4th position, which is where he finished. And that is Peter Ellis. He is going back to the CrossFit Games, punched his ticket. I had also picked Bailey Martin. He withdrew with an injury, so no Bailey Martin. That was an incorrect pick, but arguably didn't know that was going to happen. But our second qualifier was Isaac Newman, finishing in 5th with a pretty strong lead over the 6th place position, Jack Monahan. Isaac had 4:59 and Jack had 4:19. Let's head over to the pro individual women, and the woman we all have our eyes on and still, I guess, have some questions about, and that is our tia-clair Toomey. She won even more dominantly than Ricky Garrard, and she's been doing high rocks races all year. She finished with 597 points, meaning she finished 2nd in one workout, and everything else she won. And some of it she won in such a dominant way, she probably could have slowed down. Like in the first event, which had a bunch of running in it, which makes sense. She finished in 20 minutes and 50 seconds. Second place was 22 minutes and 54 seconds. That's beating the 2nd place athlete in that workout, Maddie Sturt, by more than 2 minutes. Like she could have just relaxed a little bit, didn't have to push so hard, but it didn't matter because she would come back and win the next event. And she would do that in 5:34. The 2nd place finisher in that event was Grace Walton, and she finished in 7:36. So again, 2 minutes, but this is 2 minutes on a workout that she finished under 6 minutes. Tia finished under 6 minutes versus a workout that Tia finished in over 20 minutes. 2 minutes on that workout, freaking massive. We talk about that P-score system that has been used a little bit in some competitions that rewards good finishes. Tia would have an extraordinary score because of some of these finishes. And her 2nd place finish in that one event was by 5 seconds. So she wouldn't have lost that many points on a 10-minute workout, almost 11-minute workout, where she lost by 5 seconds. Tia would have had an extraordinary score, maybe close to what she has. Maybe it would have been like 5:99. It's just insane. Tia is the GOAT. And on the Torian Pro leaderboard right now, it has a ticket next to her name. The tickets indicate who's going to the games. She didn't pass that ticket on to anyone else, but she did say the word retirement.
The Torian Pro creates dreams and turns dreams into reality, and I just will be forever grateful. And, you know, to end it here in front of a home crowd, tomorrow's never promised, and I think that's why it's so hard for me to retire.
I don't know. But even in the broadcast on the first day, they were talking about Tia, and this is her final Torian Pro, but they said like her last competition in Australia or something like that. Everyone, there's a reason we're not saying this is her last competition. Because I think she's going to the games. Even though she did say retirement. That threw me for a second. I was like, ooh, maybe I'm wrong. But I'm still calling her to go to the games. She has her ticket. That's what's on the leaderboard. I'm going with it. 2nd place was Maddie Sturt. Maddie already had her ticket through the N affiliate. Awesome for Maddie. She already had it. She looked good here. Had a pretty solid 2nd place finish, finishing with 5:55. And then 3rd place had 4:98. So Maddie was in 2nd all weekend. Looked real good, getting competition experience. In 3rd is your 2nd CrossFit Games qualifier, because remember, Tia did take one of those tickets. I feel like we might assume like Tia already had her ticket. She did not. It's easy to think like Tia had it, but she did not. So Emily DeRoy was the athlete who finished in 3rd and got that 2nd ticket to the CrossFit Games. She was someone I had to watch, but not someone I had qualifying. But I don't think we should be shocked. She qualified as an individual 2 years ago, went team last year with Con Porter, James Newberry, and Kara Saunders. They won the games. So pretty fit people to work out with. I mean, Kara Saunders has been on the podium. She almost beat tia-clair Toomey for her first CrossFit Games win. So she spent a year working out with some pretty legit athletes, and now she's qualifying for the 2nd time on her own. Good performance by Emily DeRoy. Although she was only 3 points ahead of 4th place, Grace Walton. Does that really matter? No, because Grace Walton already also had her ticket through the in-affiliate semifinals. We have a lot of Australians going to the games, 4 women, 4 men, because of the in-affiliates. And I think there's always been a little bit of a discussion about maybe Australia needs more spots, needs 4 spots, you know, I think they got like 2 or 3 some years. And I think this proves that they can send 4 people to the games because they are this year. In 5th was Georgia Pryor, someone I had mentioned to keep your eyes on. And she, while 5th sounds close, she was not super close. Emily DeRoy, who finished in 3rd, 498, got that ticket. Georgia Pryor was in 5th, but she was at 418. And 4th place Grace Walton was 495. So the drop-off was significant. Gemma Hawk was your 6th place. Daisy McDonald, who I thought would qualify and has qualified for the games before, she was in 7th. Bronnie Callis was in 8th. Ella Price in 9th, and Haley Adams, not the one from Mayhem, in 10th. I do think Tia being back in this field does shake things up quite a bit. Tia's just a hard person to compete next to. She's gonna take a lot of the points, and she did that. And if she goes to the games, she'll do it again. There was a 235-pound clean for the women here. I thought she would struggle with that, and she won that workout. She won most of them, and she won it by 2 minutes. Like, she was running between strict handstand push-ups and very heavy cleans. Insane. She's just better, and still is just better. She's going from the games. I think she's going to the games. She's going to keep doing the high rocks. This might be her last games, and she's just doing all this advertising, doing all this promoting of both things. Her final CrossFit Games, probably, and high rocks. She's making her money, building a business. Impressive. Tia's impressive. Moving over to Rebel Renegade Games. That is the Africa region. Now, this region only got 1 ticket to the CrossFit Games, and it did not go to Sarah Sigmundsdottir on the women's side. Felt like this was Sarah's opportunity. Like, if Sarah was going to ever get back to the CrossFit Games, it would have to be here. And she just fell a little bit short. She won quite a few events, looked very good in those events, but with her injuries, running is something she hasn't had the opportunity to do much of, or any at all. And there was a 3-kilometer run, and she came in almost dead last on that 3K. Maybe she was last. She did make up some ground. It was a triple threes event, 3K run, followed by 3K jump rope, and ended with a 3K row. So she didn't finish last, but she came in pretty much last. And she was saying she might have to walk that run. She didn't walk, but she's just very far behind the field. And that was a finish that she just couldn't overcome. She finished 3rd. Great to be on the podium, but she did not get a ticket to the CrossFit Games. The athlete that did is an athlete that has been working towards this for a while. That is Christina Lividitakis. She finished 1st over Evie Hollis, and they had a battle most of the weekend. Those two really separated themselves even from Sarah at a certain point during the weekend. Now, there was an odd standard on the handstand push-ups in the final event that took Evie sort of out of it. She kept on getting no reps. She looked frustrated. She was looking over at her judge. I think I saw Sarah get some no reps for this same reason. Had to do with the way the hips had to be pressed out. And it just seemed a little bit awkward. Like, the handstand push-ups looked legit. It didn't seem like you needed to like overly push your hips out, but that's what they were looking for. That's what the judges had asked for. That's what was standardized across the programming. You saw it on the men's side too. One of the men who finished in 3rd, but looked like he could legitimately compete for 1st and was in contention for 1st. That is Rudan El Gadouni. I probably mispronounced that. But he was in the mix, and then he was getting a ton of no reps as well. Kind of an awkward standard. I don't think it really made a big difference on the women's side, because I think Christina was in 1st going into that event. But it definitely had some sort of impact and made the end of Evie's weekend not very good. Might as well move over to 1st on the men's side, and it is the man that I had in 1st, and that is Toby Buckland. He got his ticket to the CrossFit Games. He and Christina will be the 2 athletes out of the African region. And also, Christina had a opportunity to compete at Torian Pro this weekend, and she chose to go to Rebel Renegade Games. It was the right decision, and she knows it. Okay, finally, the last competition of the weekend, which we will just touch on briefly, that is the Far East Throwdown. This again is a 1 qualifying athlete. That was also what Africa was, just 1 athlete from these 2 semifinals. And on the women's side, the final leaderboard had the person that I picked to finish first, but doesn't need a ticket, and that is Seungyeong Choi. She already qualified out of Waddlands, out of a competition in Europe. I was super impressed by that, and that is why I put her in first here. Well, she usually does well in Asia as well, but she just did so well there that I thought even knowing that this wasn't a competition she needed to win, she would still have the ability to do well here. And she did. She won it. Second was an athlete I believe I had in my athletes to watch, but not who I had to qualify, and that is Mariana Meza, or at the very least, she's an athlete that I have heard quite a bit about, and she is qualifying out of this semifinal, which was open to people outside of Asia. Sarah Kaya was an athlete that I thought would qualify out of this. She has done decently well at the CrossFit Games, obviously has made it there before, and just this wasn't her year. On the men's side, the athlete that finished first is the athlete that I had predicted to finish first as well, and is the athlete that gets the games ticket. That is Morteza Sagat. I did mention the second place athlete as someone to keep an eye on too, because Brian Friend had this athlete as his first place pick, although I was like, I don't think so. But he did do really well. He finished in second. That is Thiago Luzez. Those were your top 2, but only 1 get a ticket here. Moritz Sagat is who we will probably see at the games as long as everything goes well with visa. That's always a thing that's a question with some of these international athletes. That wraps up this week, which was a big one. We do have 1 more week of in-person qualifying events, and next week that will be NorCal Classic. I will be previewing that. I will have a wrap-up of that. So if you're interested in watching all that, make sure you subscribe. I appreciate you all for watching. Carson just sat down next to me. You want to say hi? You want to say hi? Oh, here he is. He's saying hi. All right. We appreciate you all for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.